marches.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We'll be back in half an hour.
Okay, welcome everyone to round 3. We invite the Prime Minister. Yeah.
Well, before I start, I'm sorry if I don't make eye contact. Sometimes I get lost in my own reflection. he just deducted marks for that. A few weeks ago, we had the Women's March in Kuala Lumpur, where the things that they were fighting for were things like, for example, legislation against child marriage, legislation against marital rape, and having structures that protect women better within the law and within the society, and spreading that general awareness towards women's rights in general in the country. However, there was, in the instance where there was participation and there was a propagation of goals from other movements. For example, the trans women movement in Malaysia, like they were also making claims within that march as well. And you also have members of the LGBT movement in that particular march as well, pushing forward their ideas. That's when it came to the media, the problem was there was a convolution of all these ideas and an association for the feminist movement and women's marches to the LGBT movement. Now, this could probably be fine in a more liberal world. But however, that's not necessarily the world that we live in. We think that if you wanted to talk about extremely liberal worlds, then probably you wouldn't have a women's march to begin with. So we think that this is rather a society that is somewhat appreciative towards women's ideology, women's plights and what they are fighting for. But we don't think that this is a society that would necessarily be able to agree with the LGBT demands and with the demands from the LGBT movement that incorporate themselves into these women's marches. That being said, the society that we will be talking about would somewhat be like the society in Malaysia, or more moderate or similarly moderate societies as well, right? Because only then you can have the full impact of the debate. Two things that I'll be talking about. One, why women's marches do not have a responsibility to cater to these other social movements. And second, how is the incorporation of the goals from other movements making the fight, how have they made the fight harder? Before we move on to those issues, several clarifications or several setting up of this debate. What are the kinds of movements or the kinds of goals that would probably be incorporated? We think that on face value, they would seem like they are similar goals. Like, for example, sexual liberation, fought by both women and also the homosexual community wanted to have that sexual liberation as well. We think economic equality, for example, between women and also between trans women in order for them to be able to have opportunities to get jobs. However, if you were to go deeper and look deeper into the analysis of what they are fighting for, because these issues are very specific to those particular groups, the solutions for those issues are also different solutions in order for you to be able to cater to the full to cater to that full issue. What does this look like? This looks like sexual liberation in the context of women's rights in Malaysia, for example, is like having laws against marital rape and having women to have the ability to say no to sex during even when they are in a marriage, in comparison to homosexual individuals who will probably want to fight for their marriage to be recognized and their marriage to be legalized. So these are both fighting for generally similar goals. They have vastly different things or vastly different policies that they will want to fight for. We think that this motion also is about the women's marches and not necessarily about the movements themselves. We think that if you have a women's march and you promote it as a women's march, we think that therefore you would have a priority towards the women and not necessarily to the other movements. We don't necessarily reject other movements or other goals. We just say that we don't want you to to have those goals incorporated in our women's marches. We say that if you want to participate and fight for our goals, we could also probably, when you have your own marches, when you have your gay rights movement marches, we think that that's something that we could also probably participate in as well. But insofar as the women's march, we think that there is a priority towards protecting women. First issue: why are women's marches? Why do women marches not have responsibility? But for that,
see, now you are agreeing to the common ground where they have collective interest, right, which is to go against all form of discrimination. So we feel there is a common ground where they can fight in the same page, and we feel that it's a better effect after that, right?
But discrimination in of itself is a very nuanced matter where it requires very specific solutions. There is very specific policies that these groups fight for. You can't just put all of them together and just say we want to fight discrimination in general, because that oftentimes, I'll get that further into my argument, confuses people onto what are the solutions. We recognize that you are discriminated, but then the question then becomes, what can we do next? I'll get that further into the second issue in this debate. First, why do the women's marches don't necessarily have a responsibility? We think that in terms of the vulnerability of what the women's marches were fighting for, we would posit to you that women in these countries are actually more vulnerable than the LGBT movement. Even though the LGBT movement are a minority number, we think they have other avenues for them to be able to protect themselves. One, they have their own movements for themselves and they have their own marches. But secondly, if you realize the things that they are fighting for, the feminist movements in these countries or these women's marches are fighting for protection for their physical body. Like, for example, marital rape is against their bodily autonomy for what they want to do. Like, for example, child marriage, right? The things that they are fighting against, child marriage, is harming or causing a physical and mental harm towards these children at the end of the day. In contrast to the fight of the LGBT movement, we think that individuals on the ground don't necessarily physically hurt them. But when they do physically hurt them, they have the protection of the law in the sense of like battery and a sense of abuse, right? But women don't necessarily have that when it comes to things like marital rape. We think that, however, their fight then becomes is about the idea of identity and their identity being accepted. And we think when it is the problem of identity, we think that they're like a homosexual individual going out on the streets. People won't know you are a homosexual individual because that is something that you don't necessarily have to tell everyone. However, you cannot run away from being seen as a woman within society, and that identity is comparatively more visceral. I mean, that's when people do things like catcalling you, and people probably even you are at the risk of that particular harm as well. So in terms of vulnerability, we think that women are more vulnerable. But we also think that the Women's March acts as a support structure, and there is more proximity towards women's issues because the people who get together for these women's marches or organize these women's marches are people who have gone through the similar experience. However, the experience of individuals within the LGBT community are different experiences that they have gone through, and we think that this creates a clash in which you don't have that support structure and you're not able to voice out your experiences because these are individuals who don't necessarily have the same experience to you. How does this necessarily make the incorporation of how does incorporation make this fight necessarily harder? They might argue, oh, but we get more mass. But we think that mass isn't necessarily true because for all the LGBT individuals that you have joining the Women's March or pushing their idea within the Women's March, you have a lot of women within this country who want to fight for women's rights, but they don't necessarily agree with the LGBT movement and don't necessarily agree with accepting LGBT individuals within our society. And you lose out these women, and they make up a large chunk of this women's marches as well. So even if you add new people, we think that a lot of people also leave. I mean that at the end of the day doesn't necessarily create that increase. But what happens then is that you don't necessarily have a direct message. I think a clear and direct message is particularly important for you to achieve your goal, because only then is people will know how they will be most likely able to support you and protect your group. I think this convolution creates a confusion within society and doesn't necessarily solve the outcome and doesn't necessarily solve the situation. So therefore, it isn't a comparative between having women's rights versus everyone's rights. It is a comparison between women's rights and having no rights at all. Extremely proud to
I'm speaking for that speech, and I invite the leader of here.
See, this debate is simply about which side better caters for the fight of rights, maybe, and particularly why is it exclusive for women or is it exclusive for all layers of society, regardless of what they fight for, right? See, the thing is that to directly engage with the rebuttals and the points came out from side government was that they were saying that every fight for rights needs a specific solution due to what are they fighting for, and you including it will actually cause this confusion just because that it would mix up with the rights of, for example, he took the context of Malaysia, for example, the LGBT rights and the women's rights, right? And the main idea was that he was not really agreeing to the fact that they really had a strong common ground, which is going against all form of discrimination, right? See, that is the thing that we feel inside opposition, that we live, maybe we would say that we're fighting for the rights, but actually we're living we're actually letting go certain part of the discrimination part, and we're not really fighting wholeheartedly against that, and we're leaving a certain part of it, and that leaving out would actually be really problematic at the very end, right? See, the another thing is that the reason why we're actually saying that it is actually really important, yes, to prioritize women. Yes, we agree that whatever he gave examples about how women was looked upon and everything was actually acceptable. But the reason why we feel that was not only exclusive to that, and it could be inclusive, it could be will be answered in my argument, right? So the first point, my first argument is that which one better empowers, right? Which one brings the better empowerment when you talk about women marches, feminist movement, or what's or not, right? Which one would actually, when you incorporate, will actually empower more to actually fight for the rights? And why is it in line with other social major movements, right? See, the first thing is that the reason why the uproar of feminist movement is they are not being heard, right? They have been always been looked upon. They have been taken for granted just because they have certain things that other people feel is not important. See, that is the first thing. And another thing is that they were fighting all forms of discrimination, being discriminated, being rated, being categorized, having this categorical of women, of how women should be to be pretty, how women should be to be beautiful, how women should be to be strong, what is their limitation, how they should be. This controlling in this particular set rules and everything was actually an all form of discrimination. See, this thing goes in line with, for example, LGBT, right? See, now we are saying that one human should follow whatever sexual preferences with, for example, the gender that we're born with, and why they should stick with it, and how is it wrong if you go with a different sexual orientation and all this stigmatizing and everything, right? See, this thing is that why we feel feminist movement will be stronger, and not now, before 6. Now, what I would say that now feminist movement will be stronger, and how is it the fight will be then much more meaningful. And we're willing to trade off with a little bit of slow growth. Yes, we do acknowledge. Maybe some of the social major movement will then be a little bit of liability. Why? Because they've been maybe going opposing with the ruling political party understanding of whatever they want in their country. Maybe it will be a slide of the liability, and we feel maybe it could be a trade-off of their growth, right? But what we feel later on, the outcome is very pragmatic and very effective here, right? Is that the meaningfulness of that fight, right? Now we are saying that we want government to give attention to all demands of rights, right? See, now when we go inclusive, right, the first thing after empowerment, after this meaningfulness and inline, we feel that going collective will create an impactful effect, right? See, now I'll give you an example. For example, in US, right, if you talk about women's rights, people might just say, all right, it's normal, it's a norm thing we have heard. But if you say a black woman has been discriminated, the impactfulness will be much stronger. And why am I saying that? And why is it really important to look upon that? And how is it being collective is really better to actually being heard strongly and given attention and create a discussion will then bring a better approach to it, right? Yes, before that.
In your best case scenario, you make people realize that these groups are discriminated. But how do you deal with those discrimination, and how do you make the solutions effective? Only then you can get that impact.
See, that's the thing, right? The thing is that talking about this collective idea and how he demands it from our side to be effective, right? See, the thing is that another thing we would like to also engage talking about effectiveness. So I talk to you how is it effective in through the meaningfulness, and how is it in line, and how people will feel that they belong to that movement, right? You were saying that there were conflict of interest in that particular group because they have different experiences. But then I rebutted that with saying that they have something in line, right, which they feel discriminated. See, now women empowerment and this women fight or whatever is being, they know how it feels to come from scratch, right? Now we do acknowledge that this feminist movement are having a strong uphold, and they are now recognized as a medium to fight for the rights. When you talk about feminist movement, it's not foreign anymore, but now it's foreign here to talk about LGBT movement. See, now what we are trying to say is that it will be better off. Yes, we do acknowledge the certain problems that will come. Maybe backlashes coming saying that how would feminist movement then join with this LGBT movement and what's or not, right? Is it fair or not according to the religion context or what's or not, right? But what we are trying to say is that we are talking about liberalization, right? Because we are going against some of these. We would say now something which is irrelevant according to religion, saying that women should be below the man and what's or not, right? See, this is something that's also the one for the LGBT. See, now creating a discussion which is obviously being backlash very strongly would be sometimes very meaningful at the very end, right? For you to go for a fight is actually going against the norm. Obviously, when you talk about empowerment, at first it will be strongly opposed, right? That is why we say that the empowerment will be actually very, we could value whether the empowerment is strong or not, because how is it going against the norm, right? No, not now. So, like, what am I trying to say is that, for example, right, like now what am I trying to say is that for now, we can say that how strong feminist movement will actually go, will be in line in that empowering, because we are going something against the norm, right? See, now, the thing is that I would say that when you talk about political support, right, when now LGBT movement is left alone, right, we want to focus about feminist movement. And we feel that LGBT movement should be given the idea because of liberalization. We want the idea of accepting what the citizen want, regardless of whatever rules and regulation, as long as it does not deteriorate other people's life or what's or not, right? So as long as they are living their life, they're living what they can do, we want the liberation to happen. See, this liberation should not be bounded by the ideas of norms. See, empowerment will not be effective if we follow and we go in the ideas of getting the support, what will people accept or what people will not accept. We now have to go in the sense that we don't care whether people accept or not. I feel this is the best for the women's community. We feel this is the best for this side, right? See, now that is the right way of doing empowerment, because we don't go for the things that we don't think about what is going to be accepted, but we go for what we really want and how can we change the mindset who then people accept our fight, right? See, now what we feel that in the very end is that when you go inclusive, we also can go for the political support, and that political support will actually be later elaborated in my second speaker's speech, right? So in total, we have seen that we have really tackled this case very well, and we feel that side opposition has taken state. Thank you.
Thanks for the speech, and I invite the Deputy Prime Minister.
The feminist movement is not about stating problems. It's also about preferring solutions, looking for solutions. When you look at the feminist movement and all other kind of movements out there, the solutions to their problem are fundamentally different. And that is what the crux of their struggle and movement is about. Fighting for solution, fighting against policy, fighting for policy. Some LGBT movement will probably want a better definition of what marriage is. Women, on the other hand, probably want a law that's against marital rape. You can't fight for both of them at the same time and have the same kind of impact. That is what they have to contend with on their side. The moment in which you bring these two things together, they have to contend with the fact that you're going to trade off the rights of some women that you could have fought for away, and those rights probably and they've never really given us any reason as to why the feminist movement has any obligation toward any of this movement. We're not for antagonizing them. What we want is a situation in which feminist movement prioritize issues that are very pertinent to women. We're talking about abortion, we're talking about wage gap, we're talking about the fact that there's something called marital rape. Look, their argument on their side is, oh, we want a common ground so that we can make them stronger. That's exactly what the problem is, because saying things like we're against all form of oppression is extremely too vague for even an average individual to understand. What do you mean by you're against all form of oppression? Everybody can say I am against all form of oppression. Even the people who oppress you would probably say the same thing. But the problem here is your message has to be very concise to what you want. For example, we want this kind of right, we want that kind of right, not a situation in which you lose control over the kind of message you're trying to pass across to the people, and given that the attention span of people are very limited. But secondly, they also want to talk about the fact that, oh, we want collective help from other group of people. Have a seat, I'm going to take you later. Collective benefit from all kind of people. But the problem here is you're taking a lot of collective audience from a lot of weak people, and these people aren't really gonna bring any kind of marginal any kind of increase to your problem. I'm gonna go into my argument. I have two arguments in my speech. First, I'm gonna tell you how the feminist movement becomes a lot less relatable, and secondly, I'm gonna talk to you about how it changes the focus of the feminist movement, which is extremely very bad for women. Before that, though,
See, in your side, right, there's no inclusiveness. So you're basically trying to say that in your side, you have to be this to be a feminist. You have to do that. You have to meet a particular goal only on this to actually support the feminism and be in line with the fight, right? So there's no inclusiveness, and there's very categorical and stigmatization happening in your side.
So first, that POI extremely ignores like half of John's speech where he was saying why the feminist movement only has an obligation to women and they have an obligation first to women and they should do this. But secondly, it also ignores the second part of his speech when he was explaining to you that, look, fighting for all other these goals essentially affects women more. I'm gonna even deal with that more in my speech. Understand the context of my first argument, how it changes the focus of feminist movement here is, one, feminist movement should fight for things that are exclusively feminist. They should fight for things that affect women because these are things that are extremely important to the survival of women, but also equality of women are things that are necessary for them to survive and may not be in line with other people's group or with the ethos of other groups. Why is it true that it changes their focus? The first thing is taking up goals of other movements means the kind of policy you try to fight for has to be inclusive of their goals. That is to say, you probably would shift from fighting for abortion or fighting against marital rape to fighting for, like, let's change the definition of marriage and all these kind of things. This means so things that intersect with other movement. This means it excludes women's specific issues because they are now deprioritized because they're not very inclusive to what other group face. Then secondly, is also the issue of resources. Understand that feminist movement have limited resources to fight on many different fronts or many different metrics. This is extremely very bad. But thirdly, we tell you that the kind of people they're trying to get their attention, for example, the attention of people you're trying to get is very limited. You can't just bombard them with as many messages as possible. You have to be able to give them a very concise message so that they go to the ballot with those kind of message, or they at the very least confront their politicians with all that kind of message. Why is it bad that the focus shifts? Number one is degradation of actual policy. Like 30 or 40 years ago in the US, abortion is legal in all states. But there's a degradation of this policy when states are able to revoke abortion law in places like Texas, Virginia. The reason being that the feminist movement has been able to shift its focus from centrally focusing on women to focusing on much bigger group, which means policies that previously benefit women are degrading and less women actually benefit from this policy. But secondly, it's also fighting for actual policy. For example, you shift your attention from fighting for things that would generally benefit women to things that wouldn't benefit women. Now they want to talk about, like, oh, they're okay with slower growth and this is actually very good. We do not think that's good because, look, slower growth for those people might be okay, but for women it's never okay, especially women who are subjected to rape. You as a woman can never change your identity as a woman because it's very obvious that you're a woman. You're probably going to be subjected to catcalling. You're not going to be given this kind of weight. But a gay person can probably hide the fact that he's gay. A Muslim or an immigrant to some extent can still hide the fact that they are a Muslim or immigrant. This is not true for women. This is why women are more important and the feminist movement should actually take control. But secondly, how does the feminist movement become a lot less relatable for this individual? The first one is women are of diverse background. They're from different kind of political ideology, from right-wing political ideology. Some of them are religious. Why does it exclude them? First thing is the bigger issue that women, like women cannot, there are a lot of reasons. Can I have water?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so the first problem here is you start fighting for a lot of other issues that women cannot all relate to. For example, you start fighting for other gay people. These are women that religious people or right-wing women would not necessarily relate to begin with. But secondly, there's just a vagueness that comes to your fight that essentially means a lot of people do not understand what you're fighting for, but also you lose control of the message when different people get different ideas of what your messages are and then able to conflict it. But thirdly, it's also about the identity of the movement. Like, what does the movement essentially represent? We think it's better when we have different movements for different causes. For example, gay people have their movement, immigrants do have their movement, and women as well have their movement. The reason is for women to be able to relate, but also for women to be able to, like, have support structure. Like, I can go to this movement and have the kind of support structure I want, as opposed to a movement that just fight for things that they do not relate to. Why is this extremely bad? Number one, you eliminate those women from actually getting any kind of benefit from the feminist movement, especially when you start fighting for things they do not believe in. But number two, you lose critical mass the moment in which you actually alienate them, because this critical mass is essential for you to be a political threat, for politicians to actually focus on you, for politicians to actually want to take you serious. But the moment in which you lose the support of this right-wing women or this religious women, especially in places like Nigeria and Malaysia, that is when you are less likely to become a political threat that's required. But also the volume of your message just become extremely large to the point in which people stop paying attention. We're extremely proud to propose.
Because of speech and deputy leader.
In my today's speech, I'm going to divide it into two parts. Firstly, on how does this whole policy can benefit feminism movement as a whole, and secondly, how does this make the entire fight for feminism and also homosexual rights become more inclusive. So before I move on to my speech, so a few responses. Firstly, they tell us that the feminism, these families, they do not have the responsibility to actually incorporate this goals. But we think that under our side, under the opposition, we think that those people who fight for homosexual rights and those feminists, they actually face this. They actually face the same kind of treatment when they were discriminated. That when they were discriminated because they come from the same place, because they feel the same way when they are discriminated. So we think that there is this obligation on these feminists to actually incorporate these goals. So because the entire purpose of feminism is to fight for all women, and also their purpose is to not leave anyone behind in their fight. So we think that this, like when they see someone that have actually faced the same kind of discrimination that they have experienced before, they feel the same way that, oh, I want to help these people. That's why they have this responsibility to actually incorporate these goals. And they also tell us that the fight of feminism will become harder after incorporating these goals, right? Like during my LO speech, he had already told you that we are willing to trade off like a small portion of the growth for feminism movement, right? But we think that even if it does not increase, right, we think the purpose of feminism is still be able to be realized under our side, because their purpose is not, they do not want to leave anyone behind of this whole spirit of feminism, right? Like because they feel the same way and they feel like they want to help them. And also they also tell us that this might confuse the whole goal of feminism, because you are putting too many messages in one, you are compressing too many messages and pass it to the people. We think if your message is not strong enough, especially in Malaysia where people are somehow not, are some where feminism rights are still developing, we think that by combining more sources, more rights, you're able to enlarge your whole message to be able to let people hear you, to let people to see you as like a huge community that deserves attention to spread their rights, right? So we think that, and also they tell us that when you have so many goals in one movement, that you are unable to give specific solutions to each goal. The thing is, even within feminism movement itself, it offers different they already have different goals. For example, they want to fight for marital rape, that's one problem. They want to fight for equal pay, that's another problem. So even within feminism movement itself, they already have like a lot of goals. So we think that by incorporating these other rights, other movements, and each movement only provide like one goal at the same time when they fight for each, and we think that it is also likely to be achieved at the same at the end of the day, because right at the first in the first place, this feminism movement already like exists within like already there are already like a few problems that have been encountered by this feminism movement, right? So moving on to my substantive. So how does this benefit feminism movement as a whole? We think that when you combine all these different rights, you into feminism movement, you also combine all these parties, meaning you're more likely to get more funding, more resources. So when you get this more funding and more resources, you also get like, okay, you're able to get more media attention, because now your community is this huge, meaning, oh, the newspapers, the broadcasting station, they are more likely to cover you as like the headlines and so on. So we think, and with this greater community, we think this will also give feminism movement a greater lobbying power. Because note that these MPs, this parliament, this member of parliament, they always want to choose the social movement that are likely to gain as many followers as possible, so that they can get as much support from the people, right? So when they choose, they are incentivized to help this feminism movement who have already incorporated different goals, because they are likely to cater to different kinds of people and get their votes, right? So when we have this incentivizes MP to support feminism movement, which is incorporated with different goals. So it is more likely that within the parliament we are able to create a change in laws and law enforcement and policy decisions, right? Okay, yes.
In order for MPs to create that change, it has to have the people wanting it first. Why is it likely in these countries and in these societies that people will support LGBT movement?
So we think that, okay, we think that when there are certain groups which support homosexual rights, LGBT rights, and there are also certain people which support feminist movement. So when you incorporate those goals, you're also like encouraging them and spreading the idea of homosexual rights towards them. I mean, one day they're willing to accept that idea, because under their side, if you don't incorporate those goals at all, like those kind of messages will never be transferred to channel to the people. So under our side, we at least like incorporate those goals and spread that message to the people, right? So moving on to the second substantive on how does this make the entire fight become more inclusive, right? So now you incorporate different groups of people into feminism movement, meaning there are other people, these people representing different sections of society, they also represent feminism movement, meaning you break the stigmatization that only women can support feminism. You break the stereotypes that only LGBT can support. Only you belonging to LGBT society, you can support LGBT rights. So meaning you break this kind of stigma, you break this kind of stereotypes, meaning more people who feel the same way, they'll more likely to support you, because okay, I feel like, okay, even though I don't belong to that community, but because I have this feelings that I want to help them, so this will encourage people to actually support them at the end of the day. So when you have this kind of more inclusive, you're able to create more support under our side, and also spread this kind of messages towards more people, and have more people to actually support your movement. So at the end of the day, we think under our side, we're able to create a greater support structure for not only feminists but also other social activists. By that, I'm very proud to oppose.
Yeah, thank you for the speech. I invite you to come. Here you go.
So we have won this debate on three issues.
Firstly, because we have proven to you why it's principally right for them to just focus on themselves, for this woman to focus on themselves. And secondly, because we have also proven that there are tangible harms that have been that is a result of this trend. And thirdly, because we have also proven that our world is necessarily better. So on the first issue of it being principally right for them to do so, because John have told you that the nature of women not being able to escape their identity, given that they're women, as compared to LGBT who are more able to hide who they are. We think that women have a sense of urgency to protect the issues that happen to them. Policies that protect women from marital rape, policies that allow women to have a choice in whether they want to abort or not, are policies that needs a sense of urgency and sense of protection. So this response to this idea that comes from DNO, when she says that they have to do this because they have a responsibility to help other people. We tell you that yes, we accept it down. We accept that there is a responsibility to help other people, but it's a matter of priority. We think that women's marches and women's movement and feminist movement must strive to ensure that their primary goal of uplifting and empowering women is fulfilled. And that responsibility, the responsibility to help people, must help their own people and women by themselves. But they come here and tell you that better empowerment happens in their world because firstly, there will be a collective force. Now, what exactly is the constitution of this collective? It is made up of people who are oppressed. It is made up of people who don't have access to power. Like the LGBT people are oftentimes don't have access to power, given that they are oppressed, like what they mentioned. So all of this political will that comes that magically comes in their world doesn't necessarily exist. So we tell you that even if they have more people, it doesn't necessarily translate to having more people that can actually effectively change. On the other hand, on our side, we have religious women and like women in power who necessarily have certain misgivings about misgivings about the LGBT movement, who will not feel disenfranchised when these movements adopt to them. And secondly, they say that it makes the fight more meaningful. But they assume that it will be meaningful for all women. When there are certain sections of women, certain significant sections of women who don't necessarily feel the same way about the LGBT that they do. So it will not make it meaningful. It will in fact disenfranchise them and be an incentive for them to further themselves away from the movement. And I will tell you how harmful that is in my argument. So moving on to my second issue, what are exactly the tangible harms that have come from this trend? Firstly, it is essentially an issue of fighting on too many fronts. When you fight on two, why is this true? Because the nature, the different nature of the issues that is brought up. For example, issues in solving the issue of gay marriage, the solution and the policy is very much different than solving the issue of marital rape. So we necessarily think that by having you fight on too many fronts, it's a drain on precious resources that can be used to actually forward causes that protect women on the ground. We think that this is very much important. So in terms of money, okay, the money to lobby governments on certain issues, it will be also forced to go to other movements. In terms of like airtime, like for example, you are expected as a feminist in their world to also give time to fight for other movements when the priority in fighting for women's rights and an urgency for that is required. Secondly, it leads to a disenfranchisement of certain movement from declaring support for the movement. Why is this true? Like I said before, like religious women in power who have an incentive to keep themselves from accepting this radical movement of this radical idea that is coming from the LGBT movement. We think when you disenfranchise this woman, what happens? First, it reduces the support that comes from this woman. It means that you also reduce support from the children that can come from this woman, where they might say they might feel that, oh, I can't necessarily support the woman's march because it goes against my values. So what does this mean? It means that you disenfranchise a significant portion of the voting population, for example, from actually declaring support. But secondly, religious women are the most vulnerable to attacks and to attacks on women's rights. So when you disenfranchise this particular woman from actually participating in this women's marches, you are actually it's not yet 6. So from participating in these women's marches, you actually disenfranchise the most vulnerable within society from doing this. So what's the conclusion and what's the actual impact for them? It means it actually means a degradation of actual policies. Like for example, Roe versus Wade, as mentioned by my second speaker, was widespread in the US in the 1950s. But currently, because of a lack of support, because women don't feel a sense of relatability to the mainstream feminist movement, they don't dare to declare their support for the general movement, and there's no real pressure. And what does that result in? It results in a degradation of the policies. It results in Texas, like for example, only having one abortion clinic in the entire state. Right, Father? Yes.
See, now you're doing your form of liberalization is actually limiting to the right rigid mindset. Right now, we want to empower, and empowerment only comes with the change of mindset, accepting things. Right.
So they assume that inclusiveness is actually a positive in and of itself. We tell you that what is positive is actually actual policy changes that protect women, that ensures that they are uplifted from attacks on their identity. We think that this is necessarily important, but also but empowerment also includes having control over the message that you deliver in your marches. When you include this disparate ideas, you are also actually literally not having control of your message, because it is as if you have an obligation to protect other people aside from yourself. We think that this is necessarily important. But why is our world necessarily better for women and for society in general? Firstly, because of focus and support from women, you will actually protect them from immediate harm. You will actually push for legislative changes and also protect the most vulnerable in terms of religious movement. But in terms for society in general, how is this beneficial? When you push for women's rights, you are pushing for equality for women's rights. You are conditioning, and when it's achieved, you are conditioning people to the idea of equality. When you condition people to the idea of equality, you are also probably setting up a society that is more willing to accept LGBT movement. We think that this development is necessarily more beneficial and necessarily more long-lasting than any sort of false narrative that they want to push. So for all those reasons, side with side government.
Thank you, speaker, for the speech, and I invite the opposition whip.
Mainly two arguments in today's debate. The first one will be why is it that will the feminist movement be slowed down or will no longer be effective, efficient? And also the second point is that how is this legislation going to be passed and how is this policy going to be passed? Mainly two arguments debate. Before I move on to engaging these arguments, I would like to first rebut certain stuff whereby I find it a bit contradictory, whereby the first speaker comes out and say that every movement is right, every movement weighs the same amount, and then suddenly from coming up on the DPM and the whip, now they're emphasizing that women's rights are way much more important. Somehow the rape women cannot hide themselves, but LGBT guys all can hide themselves from the society. I simply do not understand what policy and what roles, what ideas are they playing on. Where only women are the ones the most vulnerable, but the LGBTs are not the vulnerable ones. The black wives are not the vulnerable ones in their worlds. So I simply do not understand what side the opposition is coming, where becoming as an inclusive way. If side opposition able to prove to you guys why these solutions and why resolutions and proposal may be passed by a collective, by an inclusive rally, I totally believe that side opposition wins today's debate. What have my DPM, what have my dialogues said you today? How policies are being passed? Politicians are in nature to gain votes. So how are they going to gain votes? They want something mass. Do take in note. I believe side government are really missing the point that these feminist movement are incorporating with major movement. This major movement, that means they are already in need. There's already a demand. So that means it might be in par with the feminist movement. This is also another major movement. So when another major movement collaborates with two major movements, that means there's something in it, in something in demand. What side government coming and saying is that the politician might not be in favor, or the citizens might not be in favor because they do not know this movement and all. It's already a major movement. That means there is a demand. So now we are giving the supply. So when two major movements incorporate together, why we side opposition believe that it's much more easier to pass this solution, these problems that they are fighting for, is that first, let us play in your world. Like you in feminist movement, you are fighting for what? Marital, rape marital, you are fighting about child marriage, you are fighting about so many stuff. Why is it that in your movement you can list down so many solutions, and why is it that in our world we are just incorporating movement, listing down all together solutions? There are experienced people in this LGBT, there are experienced in feminists. We are just then providing solution. What we want is mass attention and political attention for this movement to pass. We are in the end providing same solution. Doesn't mean that when we incorporate, we work together, we all of us suddenly get messed up, all of us forgot what our solution means. Both of us are still fighting for our own separate solutions that we want, but in the end we are still cooperating, but we are giving them possible solutions. So the government can now know that this, oh, they are all together, but these LGBT are trying to fight for their recognition as LGBT in the state. They are fighting about marital rape and all, but in together they come as one. It's easier to have one chunk of rally coming to the government, listing all possibility solutions, whereby in their world they believe that one solution, one rally. So even if a feminist movement, if a child marriage, have to come for one rally, then for this thing I have to come for another rally. How many rallies do you want in the world, ladies and gentlemen? So that's why we believe that coming in a chunk as a whole gains more media attention, gains more political attention. It's whereby the politicals are in nature, they know that this is vote major. When I vote in favor for them, there's already demand. This possibility of likelihood this political will win the next election, this possibility of likelihood, not now sir, this possibility of this MPs, you know, to actually pass this resolution, pass these policies are much more higher, whereby in their world the movement stays the same. In nowhere of the speech of the PM, DPM or whip state that their movement would actually garner a better solution, a faster policy be amended. In no way, in that speech, the movement stays, their movement are still stagnant. Women are just prioritizing themselves and not prioritizing others. Why do women benefit them? By just only prioritizing themselves and not being inclusive to other states. They did not provide us the answer, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, before that.
We told you that the moment in which you incorporate other movements, you disenfranchise some part of some
I'll come to that. Thank you. All right. So I'll move on to that soon, later a bit. But before that, I think I'll just move on to that. Okay. And ladies and gentlemen, in the world of spectrum of people, ladies and gentlemen, there are this radical feminist movement, and there are this chunk of feminist movement. The people on balance side, you know, which side should we go on? The normal people, these people who are actually on other movement, and the radicals people of the other movement, ladies and gentlemen. If we are willing to trade off these two radical people, as long as this whole chunk of people come as a whole and fight for a solution which is much more better than you actually simply focusing on this small chunk of radical people. If these radical people feels that there's a need for another policy, and that they might have their own movement, own small rally on of some little bit of 1-2 solution that needs to be amended. By we are willing to take the bullet of actually removing these two small chunk of people and combining these people, and these people in the balance and whole, they know that now this rally, this movement has been incorporated by two people, where people in nature, people who in the balance are tend to support with such bigger cooperation. If you are in the middle state and then suddenly there's feminist movement, there's black life, oh, which rally should I go? One day that this both rally comes together, these people who are actually unbalanced on which they are more tendency to actually vote in favor for this rally, because now everyone is going as a collective, as a whole. So the support that you gain is much more higher, not only from people from movement, but also people from society, which I believe that side government did not even touch, and did not even give any possible solution. And also, one of the clashes, one of the burden is that they have to prove is that what are the solutions that they have, you know, in actually passing on this, passing on this women's policy and all. They do not give any solution. They only been saying that they have marital problem, they have this problem and that such problem, and also giving real life examples. Yes, I do appreciate all these examples, but in your world, if it stays like that, how does this example actually turns into a real policy and all? They do not actually provide. They only provide of them prioritizing themselves, and then and nowhere they said that their movement will actually be stronger if they don't incorporate. Sorry, And then also, what I believe that the main clashes of today's debate is that which side brings better solution. I've clearly stated that the side opposition have shown you so many solutions, not only on the feminist movement, but both feminist movement and also other movement, whereby side government did not bring any solution by only privatization. And also the other side is that which side produces a better media attention, a better garner to other sides of other movements. So this promotes other movements and all, you know. So we believe that side opposition have thoroughly win today's debate because it's much more easier in our world to pass policies. It's much more easier in our world to actually give to actually care about this feminist movement. And also, yes, we do admit we might slow down the feminist movement, but it's also to say that government are going through a slippery slope, simply saying by the DPN speech that if this feminist movement suddenly starts incorporating with other major movement, they actually will then the right of movement will be separated. Their goals will be no pointless, and their movement will be wasted. It's simply a slippery slope for the government to say such things. It might slow down, yes, we do agree, but in the end, the after goal is that our policy and in as a whole for both community brings better lives and all. With that, we are proud to oppose.
Let's see on the speech. I'd like reply.
When we talk about empowerment, when we talk about marches and what to not, right? When we talk about feminism, it's all about changing the norm, going against what has been set and been biased, and really being the revolution of that particular side, right? In order for you to do that is through liberalization, right? When we liberalization, it comes up with open mind, and those who want to be part of the liberalization, to be part of the change, in order for them to empower and give what they're supposed to get, is when we feel those are the real ones being in that movement, right? See, now they were talking about hoping on how about those who are really based on religion, those who are not willing to accept. See, now even if they defranchise, even if they don't want to be part of it, like what my third speaker said, we would gladly let them go. Why? Because we are not to say that we're not empowering for all the women's rights, but when we say that will then be a liability for their own movement. Why? Because they themselves are being confined by those restrictions, and the fight for the women's right will not then be effective, right? Why? Because they're still bonded with religions. They're being still bonded with the perception of what will then people think if I accept LGBT? What will then people think if I don't wear hijab? What will then people think if I wear a short skirt? See, those are the things will then be a liability to liberalization, to creating something which is of right, something of civilization, urbanization, of all these things that are being part and a major thing of women marches, right? See, now we are willing to trade off that, and why we feel that our side we are showing that we are improving and we are going to boost up, and there's a much more likeliness of us going further in our side, right? See, now in our side, basically we gave you major points, right? We gave my point was about empowerment. How is it then in line? How is it then going to be stronger? How is it going to be meaningfulness, full of meaningful ideas, and how is it going to be collective at the very end? How is it then going to be impactful due to the joining of interest and due to the factors that is now going to be part of the major women empowerment, right? And then how are we going to then garner political support using the advantage of how political agenda and environment goes about, right? And then we talk about inclusiveness, how inclusiveness is so exclusive in our side, and how inclusiveness is important in line and in the axis of getting the right atmosphere of fighting for the rights, right? How is inclusiveness is very in line to fight with all the norms and all the biasness, right? And my second speaker talked about how does it benefit feminism, how does lobbying power increases, and more likely to have a parliament to change the laws, right? How they are going to pass policy and what so not. See now, we have given all the possible good things and changes that will happen. In their side, they are just specifying why women should be prioritized, and they never once said that by prioritizing only women and also feeding for those who are confined with religion, those who are really concerned, those are conservative, how by feeding all those people, they still can achieve the real true empowerment of feminism, right? See, in our side, when we include that, we create all this inclusiveness, we go together, we incorporate. What we are saying is that our fight will be much more meaningful because what we are fighting for is then being achieved together. And what we mean by that is that we're not going to then change the goal of the fight. For example, if this feminist movement is going to fight for this, it's not that we are going to adjust it according to the other LGBT movement or what's or not, maybe the Black Lives movement or what's or not, right? So we are not going to adjust, it's just that we're going to fight it together and we're going to garner the intellectual minds, right? Because obviously one head is like two heads is better than one, right? We're going to cooperate and garner whatever intellectuals coming from different backgrounds, and this inclusiveness is actually better in our side, right? Maybe it could be a liability in the sense that in order to get the support, maybe there are certain hatreds towards this particular social movement. When we join, there are certain issues that are going to come. But why we feel this controversy is this dispute will actually create a better discussion, and this discussion will then get better media attention. Will look like we are in collective of getting human rights. We are all humans and we are working together to get what we deserve. And that is what we want in the sense of better humanity, right? Because we are working together and the idea and the spectrum effect is much more effective, right? Rather than them just being selfish, and whether or not them getting what they want is still a question mark on their side. So with that, I would say opposition has gladly taken this debate. Thank you.
Right, that reply.
Opposition dumped you a bunch of generic arguments which fail to be contextualized within the society of which we live in today. They told you that, if you have more people, then everything becomes great and you have a larger mass. We've posited to you that given the context of the society, which is particularly more relatively, they would probably be more able to be to relate to women's grievances and be able to support that. We've told you that this society still is a society that would still be against LGBT, for example, the country that we live in. You have a prime minister that literally says that LGBTQ will never be accepted in this country. We question whether or not, even though if your feminist movement is strong currently, whether or not you would be able to translate that into helping other individuals at the end. We've posited you throughout all three speeches as to how you including these goals and these objectives actually diminishes the credibility of your movement, diminishes your ability to participate politically, because politicians don't necessarily want to engage with the LGBTQ movement because that's generally political suicide for these individuals, right? We've posited you for these individuals. Notice their trade-off. The trade-off that they want to talk about. Let's talk about empowerment, the issue that opposition wants to talk about, their main drive in this debate. Do they actually get empowerment? Because their main trade-off was that we would trade off some women in order for us to be able to cater for the LGBTQ movement. No, that this is a women's march organized by the feminist movement. We think that it is okay for you to support other individuals, but if it comes at the expense of you trading off your own women, who you were supposed to be a support structure for, who you were supposed to be the one voicing out their grievances and voicing out their pain, we think that you are discriminating the very individuals that you are representing, and we think that is principally inconsistent for this feminist movement or for these women marches to do. We will posit to you that even if you were to trade off even a subgroup, and we've told you that oftentimes the religious women who are in feminist movement, who realize that they want economic prosperity, but they still don't support the LGBT movement, are probably the women who are the most vulnerable because they come from these communities who are more religious and who are more likely going to oppress them. These are the very women that they trade off in their role. We've told you reasons why these women don't have any other option when these other groups have their other options as well. We don't think that they get empowerment in their role, because empowerment is also the ability for you to voice out what you want. We think once you've traded off these individuals, the narrative of that movement becomes different, because when you want to incorporate these other major movements as well, that's when you no longer have control over those goals, and you no longer have control over what you want to propagate towards the rest of society. We think that in actuality, they lose their empowerment when they want to be more inclusive. Let's talk about the things that we wanted to posit. We posit to you that even in their best case scenario, where they do get that empowerment, when they feel liberated or when they feel great about themselves, that gives no value if it doesn't translate into policy changes. We've posited to you that in order for you to be able to push for policy changes, you need specific solutions. We've told you that you need to have a clear message that you want to push forward in order for other people to relate to you. Sure, you can have solutions for the other issues as well, but we've already told you, even from my speech, of how these solutions are often inherently contradictory. But even if they are not inherently contradictory, you have a limited amount of resources, limited amount of attention, as my other speakers have told you, limited amount of airtime, limited amount of political clout for people to support you. These are reasons if you give them to the other movements, you take them away from the very women that you aim to protect to begin with. Sure, they get empowerment. Sure, they get changes. But these empowerment and changes is not for the very group that these women marches are supposed to protect. We protect the most important stakeholder, most approximate stakeholder to what the main objective of this feminist movement was, and we are the team that gives the best form of liberation towards these individuals. It is unfortunate that other movements or other minorities within society are oppressed, but we have to be strategic in how we address the issue. We have to be strategic in getting those small wins in order for us to create larger changes. Extremely proud to propose.
Then voting to debate, cross the floor, shake hands, and step outside while we deliberate.
Everyone, nice to see you again.
Oh yeah, by the way.